Welcome to our 2021 International Orangutan Day event. Hello to everyone in the US and around the world watching our event tonight, in the day or in the morning, whatever time it is there. My name is Ben Callison and I lead our newly formed Borneo Orangutan Survival USA office. And I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Debbie Clemens from Orangutan Outreach. Before I turn it over to Debbie, I just want to give you a little bit more information on the BOS Foundation and the newly formed BOS USA. So the BOS Foundation was formed exactly 30 years ago to combat the ever-decreasing amount of Bornean orangutans and lush rainforest in Indonesia. Through these past 30 years, the BOS Foundation, along with its global network of partners, have worked tirelessly to reverse this terrible trend. Our progress is truly unparalleled in the orangutan protection world, with thousands of orangutans cared for over our 30-year history. We currently have over 400 orangutans in our care, almost 500 orphaned and rescued orangutans released back to the wild, and over 1.1 million acres of prime orangutan rainforest under our management, which is just incredible. So the BOS USA office just launched late last month, so we're brand new, and we are very excited to be joining this global network of partners around the world. The BOS partnership has offices in the UK, in Denmark, Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and of course our sister partner here in the US, Orangutan Outreach. To tell you more about the incredible work of Orangutan Outreach, I now pass you over to my co-host, Debbie.
Oh, thank you, Ben, and welcome to everyone. Yes, again, my name is Debbie Clemens. I'm from Orangutan Outreach, and I want to thank you for joining us for this great Orangutan Day event. And also on behalf of myself and the Orangutan Outreach Executive Director, Richard Zimmerman, I want to thank you for caring about the orangutans and for supporting their conservation efforts. So I know a lot of you are watching from the United States, so I just want you to know that Orangutan Outreach is a US-based charity organization. We were established in 2007, and since day one, we have been supporting the BOS Foundation and their incredible work to rescue, rehabilitate, and release orangutans back to their rainforest home where they belong, and also all their incredible work to protect the forest and do what they can to make sure that there is suitable habitat to release those orangutans for well into the future. So we're really excited now that BOS Foundation has a US office and that we'll be able to work together to do even more from the United States to support the BOS Foundation. What Orangutan Outreach has been doing through all these years is raising awareness about the work of the BOS Foundation and about the needs of wild orangutans. And we also work really hard to raise the critical funding that is needed to do all of this work with the orangutans. So through the years, we've been able to do that through special events and special campaigns. We're really happy that we were able to help the BOS Foundation complete their baby house facility at their Nyaru Menteng rehab center. And we've also done emergency fire fund reliefs in the years when the forest fires in Indonesia have been particularly bad. And we all know that 2020 was a really rough year and absolutely rough for the BOS Foundation. And so we did a relief fund for that as well. And I just want to thank everyone for really stepping up and helping the orangutans all through 2020 and going into 2021. We know that this pandemic has been brutal on so many people around the world. And we know that it's caused a lot of financial instability for a lot of people. And yet you all came through and the donations still came through for the orangutans. And so we really, really want to thank you for that and let you know that we're still working really hard throughout this pandemic to help the orangutans and all the people who care for the orangutans and help them all get through this. So again, we're just really excited to be working now with the BOS US office, and we'll be able to do even more for the orangutans in years to come. And again, on behalf of myself and Richard, we just cannot thank you enough for your support through the years and going forward. So we are really excited about this event tonight. Anytime that I get to talk about orangutans all day is a good day for me. So we've got a great event coming up. So Ben, can you tell us more about what we're going to be doing for the next few hours?
Absolutely, yeah. I know we have a few hours with you. And before I do, though, I just want to also echo Debbie's comments that we are so proud of having Orangutan Outreach as part of this network. I've been with the BOS Foundation for a number of years, and of course now we're starting the BOS USA office. But we wouldn't be as far as we are if it wasn't for Orangutan Outreach. So we're incredibly excited to be kind of combining our expertise, knowledge, power together to really make the US market even bigger for orangutan protection. But yeah, so very excited. And as Debbie mentions, we have an incredible lineup for you tonight that includes talks from leading experts about a range of topics. We have some behind the scenes video from our hit TV show, Orangutan Jungle School, which we know we have lots of fans out there. Yep. We have information about an incredible upcoming documentary screening that you really won't want to miss. This documentary is amazing. And a video from one of our recent helicopter rescues, one of our helicopter releases, which is amazing footage. You'll get to see the orangutans getting taken all the way back to the rainforest. So that's coming up a little bit later. And last but never least, a wonderful video of our beloved Benny. So stay tuned. So stay tuned through the next few hours, as you won't want to miss a second. But before we get all this started, we wanted to turn it over to our incredible BOS Foundation CEO, Dr. Jamartin Sihite, for an opening message.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this special event. I'm Dr. Jamartin Sihite, the CEO of the BOS Foundation, and I'm so glad that you are here with us today. Whether you are one of our neighbors here in Indonesia, one of our friends from Australia, or an orangutan supporters from anywhere else in the world. Today, we celebrate our great ape cousins, the orangutans, and the ways that they are essential to the heart of our ecosystem. They deserve our respect. They deserve to get protection. And that is exactly what we have been fighting for the past 3 decades. 2021 marks the 30 years anniversary of our work at the BOS Foundation. I've been fortunate to be part of this amazing organization and to lead such a wonderful team of dedicated orangutan warriors who have been persistently working to make a difference. Our team is made up of experts in orangutan welfare, management, and conservation. And together, we spend more than 30 years protecting these critically endangered species and their precious forest habitat. We do this by rescuing them from the area of human-wildlife conflict, providing sanctuary for rehabilitation, and reintroducing them back to the wild forest, all the while working together with local communities and conserving tropical ecosystem. This has never been about just one person acting alone. It is about all the people who are passionate about making a difference, coming together and taking action. It is about the hero and heroines who choose every day to dedicate their lives to save orangutan. I've seen their optimism, their unbreakable will, their hope. That is why I joined this organization, to be a voice for these dedicated people and the animals they deeply care for, the orangutan. And day in and day out, my team and I do our part to conserve these incredible animals. But for all of us, no matter where we are in the world, these have been incredibly trying times. The COVID-19 pandemic has threatened much of what we hold dear. And it's hard to focus on the things we normally prioritize. for the safety of our orangutans and of our employees, we decided to close our facility temporarily in March last year. But our staff continue to preserve because we have over 400 orangutans and they rely on us for food and care every single day. However, the health and safety of the animals in our care remains our top priority. And our team members have been working day and night with the utmost determination to protect the orangutans in our care from this virus. We are confident that we will, as an organization, emerge stronger, as this is exactly what our anniversary is about, acknowledging and celebrating the fact that we are stronger together. That is why I'm so grateful for all of you choosing to be part of the BOS family. Before we get started, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you who so generously support us to run our programs. We couldn't have done it without you. You have all chosen to be part of our event today because of our shared passion for saving orangutan. Your passion helped us to come together and inspire us to continue working together to overcome this crisis, so we can stay on the front lines of conservation for the years to come. During the next 3 hours, you'll be getting to know more about the challenges we tackle and why orangutan are such a unique and important species. I hope that this will prove to be memorable and fulfilling for you. Thank you.
All right, so let's jump in and let's start with our goal, right? So our goal is always to get the orangutans back to the rainforest where they belong, back to their rightful home. And this is what we like to call with BOS, orangutan freedom. So there's a lot of obstacles that get in the way on an orangutan's journey to freedom, and it delays the process. So we get a lot of questions about, oh, my favorite orangutan, why are they still in forest school? Why haven't they been moved yet and transferred to a pre-release island? And when is so-and-so going to be released finally? And so we want to talk to you a little bit about the reasons why. There's so many outside factors that can delay the process, and these are out of control of the orangutan. They're doing all their hard work through forest school, but then other things can get in the way. For example, it's very, very expensive, this whole rehabilitation and release process. So if we don't have the funding, we cannot release the orangutans and they can't get to freedom. Other things that get in the way are things like forest fires, and things have to be shut down and delayed, or a global pandemic, of course. Things have to be shut down and delayed. So there's a lot of things that can affect the orangutan's journey to freedom. And we want to bring you a couple experts who can really speak to that. So Ben, who do we have to really talk us through this journey to freedom and the obstacles in the way?
Thanks, Debbie. And I will say this beforehand, if I say their full names, I will only do them disservice. So today we will be you'll be hearing from 2 experts, and that first is Dr. Agnes, and the second is Dr. Arga, both with the BOS Foundation. So with that, we'll turn it over to them.
For the past 30 years, the BOS Foundation has rescued thousands of orangutans and released hundreds of them in safe forests. Since 2012 alone, we have reintroduced 485 orangutans into their natural habitat, where they are thriving and establishing new wild populations, which also helps to bolster the conservation prospects for the species as a whole. The ultimate goal is freedom for each and every eligible orangutan in our care. But the journey toward freedom is not an easy one. Every orangutan's journey is unique and presents challenging obstacles that must be overcome. Every journey begins with a tragedy. And oftentimes, the orangutans lose not only their homes, but also their mothers.
Jadi kita datang ke sana dengan membawa beberapa tim seperti tim medis, kemudian juga BKSDA, dan orangutan ini kabarnya mau diserahkan oleh warga. Ketika kami menyelamatkan orangutan, tidak setiap kali laporan itu lengkap. Harus selalu siap dengan kondisi apapun. Kita tahu informasi ini jelas karena kita mendapatkan foto dari pemilik. Kalau di gambar ini ya orangutan ini masih bayi.
Ya.
Nanti saya ke situ, tunggu di situ.
Oh ya ya, kita pakai ini Pak ya, pakai mobil di pasar gitu Pak. Posisinya. Oke siap. Kita nunggu di sini. Di pasar katanya nunggu.
Jadi kita standby di sini.
Standby di sini, dia yang datang. Oh itu bapaknya. Pak Jaya. Oh ya.
Dia ini siapa?
Yang pelapor.
Tapi bukan pemilik.
Kita belum tahu. Intinya dia ngelaporkan atau posisi orangutannya di mana, nanti kita ke lokasi aja.
Permisi untuk boleh makan.
Oh, boleh silakan.
Oh, bapak yang bekerja yang di Tahura.
Iya, di Tahura.
Di dinas sini kan?
Iya, dinas
kehutanan
ya.
kan? Jadi dapatnya itu dari
masyarakat.
Dari masyarakat.
Kebetulan beliau itu yang menyerahkan,
Iya,
kenal sama bapak ya.
Iya.
Dan memang mau menyerahkan. Kalau dengan bapak itu udah berapa lama?
Baru 4 hari ini. Iya, 4 hari ini.
Kalau posisi ditemukan di mana?
Di kurun seberang.
Kurun seberang desa.
Ya, masih kurun di seberang.
Oh, di hutan ya. Itu
Iya.
sedang apa?
Nah, kurang tahu juga rasanya lagi
Belum.
nyantar pasir. Ya.
Tapi memang ada dekatan sama perkebunan kelapa sawit atau apa? Ada juga.
Kebetulan ada. Induknya lari kayaknya, itu jatuh dari induknya. Yang pasti posisi dia dapat itu jatuh katanya.
Oh.
Induknya lari.
Setiap hari makan apa Pak? Selama di sini?
Susun.
Susun.
Iya, susun.
Kita bisa lihat ini Pak.
Oh, boleh.
Kandang kan ada itu?
Iya. Mana?
Itu sama ini Pak, pasti tetap tulak sama kayak ini. Gitu mau dibegendong pasti pasti leket harus.
Leket.
Ada batu-batu Pak itu.
Ada batu.
Oh, harus hangat kan.
Dijamin jadi
Sering
pelapor.
lepas.
Jadi
Tapi dari kulitnya ini dia nggak diiritasi, jadi tidak perlu diinfus. Jadi ya alhamdulillah dia dalam keadaan sehat. Belum ada giginya ini.
Belum ada ya?
Umur sekitar 6 bulan. Jenis kelamin betina.
Semoga dia cepat besar ya.
Iya.
Dan sehat selalu.
Iya.
Mungkin nanti kalau ada lagi yang menyerahkan, ada lagi yang menghubungi.
ada dalam satu keluarga itu ada flu, pasti dia ikut flu.
Ya ampun kecil, kamu Dede kasihan. Itu merinding Dede. Demam kali ya Pak? Enggak lah.
365 aja.
Maaf ya, aduh udah dinginin. Ih bisa 235. Kalau awal kayak gini yang penting memastikan dia tetap hangat. Ya susunya kan pasti ada vitamin mineralnya segala macam yang cukup kan.
Masih bingung tempat baru.
Iya di mana ya aku katanya.
Because when the infant orangutan comes to our center, it means that the orangutan already lost their mother, right? So if you can get one orangutan, it means like 5 orangutans already died, something like that. So it's so heartbreaking for me.
Usually, most of the rescued orangutans we got have previously been kept as pets. This can really affect their mental state and behavior, and sometimes the orangutans have been fed on human foods and drinks, and when they are rescued, they refuse to eat their natural fruit diet. So it takes time for the orangutans to adapt to the new diet and new lifestyle here.
Bring back their confidence at the first time is really important, because when the infant lost their parent, it means their immune system is really dropped. They will become really stressful and really easy to get sick. And somehow, if we are just too late to save them, they will pass away, something like that. We have to save them really the right time and the right moment.
The youngest orangutans join the nursery group, while juveniles are placed in forest school. Throughout their rehabilitation journey, young orphans are taught the skills they will need to survive in the wild and are stimulated to express their natural behaviors.
The first thing that we need to teach them is to bring back their confidence. Once their confidence is building up, they will easily to adapt. They will easily to adapt in the forest school, because they have lost their mother since very beginning. So they have learned nothing but only human behavior. So that's the biggest obstacle that we encounter at this stage.
Once juvenile orangutans become proficient in all necessary skills, they are placed in groups and moved to a socialization complex, where they are temporarily housed in large enclosures.
Orangutan are classed as a semi-solitary animals. They need to learn socialization skill as well, because we have to put them with the many other orphans.
Orangutan will learn a huge of things from their peers through play or observation in the high trees, making that it's a vital part of rehabilitation. I think without socialization, orangutan would not be fully equipped to survive in the wild.
An orangutan's survival skills are put to the final test when they are moved to a forested pre-release island.
The biggest challenge the orangutan will face in the pre-release island, they will have the real competition in the island with less attention from the keeper.
Every day, teams of technicians provide supplementary food and assess the overall well-being of orangutans on pre-release islands, while also collecting vital behavioral data.
So once they report there's something wrong with the orangutan, we can just go directly to go to island and check them. And we will also go to island like once a week at least, just to conduct a routine health check. And somehow we give regularly like a deworming every 1 until 3 months. Yeah, we give regularly deworming. So yeah, I think we still cover all the health check for the orangutan in pre-release island.
Once orangutans have proven themselves to be capable foragers, adept climbers, innovative nest builders, and appropriately wary of humans, they are deemed ready to return to a true wild forest.
For the transportation, we have to minimize the stress for the orangutan during transportation. Yeah, we always do the routine check every 2 hours and give their favorite and extraordinary fruit to them.
There are many things we can do to reduce orangutan stress. For instance, in the transport cage, we give leaves to play with inside the cage, and also plenty food for along the journey. Also, we put leaves on the top and then around the cage, around the transport cage, to limit how much the unfamiliar surroundings the orangutan see along the journey. So I think this helps to keep them calm a little bit.
But the one things that it will be helpful is just talk to them from heart to heart. So reassuring them that they are returning their home, and their true home is mean where they are free from kids and boundaries. So they will understand and it will make them calm. Just talk with them from heart to heart. The release of the orangutan is ultimate goal for every rehabilitation process. It is amazing moment for all of us, because we know exactly that they have gone from being kept as a pet since very young age and experienced a traumatic life, and then mistreatment from the cruel human, and undergo a long rehabilitation process. So after they go release, it's just like amazing moment. Actually, it's speechless. You can't tell about it, because that's the ultimate goal for all of us. Just like, oh my God, this orangutan, I know this orangutan since first I work here, and then now he or she go to the forest and then just enjoy the fruit forest, and then just climb and foraging the tree, do the tree's way, and then eat the bark and cambium and everything, just like, and healthy and somehow copulate with others, just like copulate, and just like, oh my God, it's just like it's like it's like magnificent feeling or tremendously amazing for me.
After release, life begins anew for these orangutans, who were free again to live their lives unencumbered by men. Still, our post-release monitoring team follows them regularly from a distance to collect valuable behavioral data regarding their adjustment to life in the wild and to intervene if they fail to adapt, become injured, or fall ill.
Because we do the hard release, it means there's no food after we open the cage. So that's the greatest challenge, I think, for them.
Orangutans have to adapt with their new environment and then explore to find food and protect themselves, like climbing in the trees and make a nest to sleep in. To make this process easier for the orangutans, we try to release small groups of orangutan who are familiar or friends with each other at the same time. And also we release them close to each other so they can find other if they need to. Normally we find that less confident orangutan will follow a more confident orangutan therefore the first few days eating the same foods, making nests next to each other or even in the same trees. So I think after this initial period of adaptation, the orangutans will separate and become solitary.
But even though that we don't give a food, but the monitor team still follow them from distance to collect the valuable behavior data regarding their adjustment to life in the wild. So only when really necessary. So this could be situation like where we need to perform emergency procedure if they become severely injured or fall sick, or if the orangutan just fail to adapt, something like that. But this decision is not easy. This decision is made based on discussion all of the stakeholder with the vet and the management in release, and then also management in Nyaru Menteng. Roughly our survival rate is greater than 70%. So that's quite high for rehabilitation orangutan.
With the support of orangutan warriors like yourself, we try to make the journey of every orangutan end with a wild and secure future for them and for their forest homes.
Well, we really hope you enjoyed that talk. It just highlights how complex the process and all of the challenges that we face in trying to get these orangutans back to the wild. As Debbie mentioned beforehand, it is so important that we get orangutans back to the wild, because it's the only way we're going to actually be able to protect the species long term, is for that DNA to get back into the wild, for them to be able to continue the orangutan population. And of course, to be able to do so, we also have to continue to expand the rainforest habitat. So with that, we're actually going to transition to a bit of a somber topic, one that unfortunately we've all been facing over the last couple of years. as a global community, and that is this horrible pandemic and the challenges that we as an organization and orangutans are facing in this terrible time. I know that for so many people around the world, it's been a very difficult time, and we hear from supporters all the time about the challenges that they're facing. And our hearts go out to all of our supporters, all of the people around the world that are dealing with this. And through that, we also have to remember that, unfortunately, orangutans are part of this pandemic. They are with us, unfortunately, in this journey to try to get through this pandemic, along with our staff at the BOS Foundation. So with that, we have our next talk, which is conservation in the time of a pandemic. And to talk to you about our speakers, I'll turn it back over to Debbie.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So we really just want you to hear from the experts, again, those people who are really on the front lines of dealing with these things. So we're going to turn it over to Francisca Solicito, who is one of the BOS Foundation veterinarians, and she's going to be having a discussion with a couple experts. First of all, Dr. Lauren Howard, who is the Associate Director of Veterinarian Services for the San Diego Zoo Safari Park here in the United States. And also we'll be joined by Dr. Greg Poetra, who is one of the veterinarians for the BOS Foundation. So we're going to turn it over to Francisca now.
Hello everyone, welcome to the online talk show presented by BOS Foundation and its partner organizations. This is a part of our public outreach programs in the event of this year's International Orangutans Day, August 19, 2021. Today we are going to talk about conservation in the time of a pandemic. The outbreak of COVID-19 changes life as we knew it by confronting communities around the world with novel public health and economic challenges. The new virus poses not only a threat to humans, but also to our great ape cousins, who have the very same receptor that is susceptible to SARS-CoV-2, the virus that manifests as COVID-19. However, conservation and animal care cannot be suspended and be moved to work from home. In this session, we will explore and compare the way captive care institutions reacted to the pandemic and continued to put the welfare of the great apes first. So, joining us today are two wildlife vets from two opposite parts of the globe, but I believe they share the same heart and passions in what they're doing for the animals. The first speaker that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Lauren Howard, the Director of Veterinary Services at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. She was first part of San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance in 2002 to 2004 as a zoological medicine resident, and then served as an associate veterinarian at the Houston Zoo for 12 years. Dr. Howard rejoined San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance in 2016 and leads the veterinary team in ensuring that the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance animals thrive by providing world-class medical and preventive care. Dr. Howard is active in San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance's initiative to bring the northern white rhino back from extinction, and in situ and ex situ elephant health and disease with an emphasis on elephant herpes virus. So good morning to you, Lauren.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
So good to have you here with us. And the second speaker is one of our BOS Foundation vet. He is Dr. Greggy Putra. Dr. Greg has been working at the Nyaru Menteng Orangutan Rehabilitation Center for 7 years now. He has extensive experience in caring for orangutans from the point of rescue to their reintroduction back to the forest, their natural home. In the Nyaru Menteng Center today, Greg is part of the team responsible for coordinating the COVID-19 prevention efforts for staff and orangutans. This includes everything from taking nasopharyngeal swab samples from both species and developing precautionary protocols and planning. So Greg, welcome to this event.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me too.
Thank you for being here. Hope you are doing fine, and so does the vet team in Nyaru Menteng and the orangutan. So I see that you are logging in from the clinic, is it?
Yes, that's correct. This is our clinic.
Nice.
Yes.
So, and I will be your host today. My name is Siska. I had also worked at BOS Nyaru Menteng before and was an animal welfare coordinator for all programs at BOS Foundation. Today, I advise Orangutan Rescue Center across Indonesia and serve as the Southeast Asia representative for the Orangutan Veterinary Advisory Group, or OVAG. So, Lauren, when we're talking about COVID-19 in wildlife, I guess the gorilla case that happened in your institution in January this year is kind of the milestone as the first case of COVID-19 in great apes or even in primates outside laboratory, right? So it's kind of, you know, that in the past there are papers suggesting that theoretically great apes and other species can get COVID because they have the same receptors, and indeed gorillas can have it and they can be quite sick. So yeah, I've heard your story many times and it's amazing. I'm always enjoy to hear how you and the team kind of orchestrated the crisis management of the situation. So to get our audience today understand the context better, I believe you have some materials to share with us. Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Siska, for the opportunity. I'm just going to very briefly, through just a handful of slides, give everyone a background on what we experienced when our entire gorilla troop was exposed to and became symptomatic due to COVID-19 earlier this year. So just a little bit of background. San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance is a conservation center with two front doors. We have the San Diego Zoo, which is downtown near the coast and the airport. And then we have the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, which is where I'm based. And it is about 15 to 20 miles north of the downtown one. So these are two completely separate parks, but managed under the same conservation organization. And we have two completely separate collections and completely separate veterinary teams. At the safari park, we have a troop of 8 gorillas. Those are the only apes we have at the safari park. Down at the zoo, they have orangutans, gorillas, and bonobos. And our gorilla troop at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, as I mentioned, is an 8-member family group with a wide cross-section of ages. We have 2 geriatric animals, a silverback and a female. We have 4 young adults to adults, and then we have 2 juveniles. And like many of us all across the globe during the pandemic, we stepped up what's normal PPE from everyday pre-pandemic. And a lot of people have asked, well, what PPE were you wearing when your gorillas became ill from COVID? So that's why I included this slide. At that point, we had daily medical screening of all of the staff entering park grounds, answering several questions about illnesses and exposures and forehead temperatures taken on every employee. All of our employees who care for animals have dedicated uniforms and shoes that don't leave the property. We did have a foot bath at the entrance to the gorilla building. And in the gorilla building and working with the gorillas, keepers were expected to wear or required to wear surgical grade disposable face masks and gloves when working with the animals, and to wear safety goggles or face shield when cleaning. So that was our standard COVID PPE at the time in January when all of this started. And here's a timeline to kind of give you an idea. The story started December 30th when one of our animal care specialists fell off, left work immediately, and went to get COVID tested. The next day, that individual did find out they were positive via nasal swab PCR and immediately let leadership at the park know. So the next day, we had all gorilla keepers start wearing N95 masks with the thought that if that would protect them from each other if they were also exposed, and also potentially to prevent shedding or more shedding to the gorillas. And everything seemed fine for a few days. And then a few days after that, on January 6th, what we call day 1, our silverback, our 47-year-old male, silverback was very lethargic and was found coughing that morning. And then later in the morning, our older female was also coughing. At that point, in addition to the N95s, we did have all the gorilla keepers start wearing face shields to protect them from any droplets that were being sprayed. The idea of having 2 gorillas coughing and a known potential COVID exposure did really elevate our suspicion for the gorillas being sick from COVID-19. The following day, the silverback was still coughing and lethargic. We had another male who began coughing. And that was when we decided to submit testing of the whole troop for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused coronavirus. Now, we did try, we talked about nasal swabs or something like that, but we were unable to really get any kind of good swabs as deep as you need to get a reliable sample. So we did end up submitting individual fecal samples. And the laboratory will tell you that fecal samples are not ideal. They're not nearly as good as a nasal swab, but they are pretty good. And especially early in disease, it does seem that fecal samples are pretty good when tested via PCR to pick up presence of the virus. The following day, our silverback was still not feeling very good. The female was coughing. And at the end of that day, we did get the PCR results from the laboratory that our gorillas were positive. And at that point, we had 8 gorillas. We were able to collect 7 fecals, and I believe 4 of them were confirmed positive on PCR. But we treated the entire troop as though they were positive because they were living in a family situation and sharing space in the building. Our gorilla continued to have lethargy, and another male started coughing that day. And the very next day after we got the results in the afternoon, we did start having the gorilla keepers start wearing Tyvek suits over their uniforms, in addition to the N95s, the gloves, the face shields, and the foot bath. And then the following day, we got a visit from the county health department, who helped us evaluate the PPE the gorilla keepers were wearing, and to greatly enhance that by training them in proper donning and doffing of PPE, setting up hot and cold zones to make sure that no contamination of that building left the site. So that was the snapshot of the first week. And a few days later, when the silverback, oh, here we go. So this is a 2 or 3 week snapshot of what happened in our troop. Overall, the clinical signs lasted about 3 weeks in the troop. And the darker squares indicate concerning signs. And that was, again, our older male and our older female. And then the lighter squares just show what kind of mild signs the rest of our gorillas had. So pretty much every gorilla in that time period had some degree of coughing, sneezing, nasal discharge, something, but nothing clinically concerning and nothing that required intervention other than our 2 oldest animals. And by January 25th, almost 3 weeks after the initial clinical sign, the troop was on the mend. And we were able to depend on some really great researchers here in San Diego to look at sequences of the gorilla strain and the strain of the animal care specialist, the keeper, that ended up being positive, and they were identical. So this is actually the first time we've been able to confirm the exact same COVID strain in an animal and a person. And it's a great indication of how amazing our county is in being able to track samples and do this kind of work. So we do know that the gorilla and the keeper were sharing the same virus. So as I mentioned, it was our 2 older animals that we caused us concern, and our silverback was by far the sickest animal. And by the following Tuesday, so a week after his initial clinical signs, he was still very lethargic and had respiratory issues, and we elected to anesthetize him. We gowned up in complete what we call CDC level PPE to protect our staff. At this point, none of us were vaccinated, and our hospital facility has a closed circulation system where we knew our treatment area and exam area wouldn't spread out to the rest of the hospital. So we took a lot of training and interventions in a short time period to get ready for this exam. And these are all the treatments that we administered to that silverback gorilla when he was under anesthesia. We did administer monoclonal antibodies, which are a really great tool in COVID. They are designated for ambulatory human patients who are high risk due to comorbidities, but not in need of, dependent on oxygen or not in need of the hospital yet. The idea is to get these antibodies into the people early on in their disease process to help fight the virus so that they don't become a need for hospitalization. So that was a perfect use for our gorilla. We also gave him nonsteroidals, antihistamine, antacids, antiemetics. We did start him on antibiotics, and we certainly gave him fluids while he was under as well. Now, Winston had probably mild heart disease beforehand that was not on treatment for. The primary findings during his exam was very low pulse oximetry, very low oxygen saturation, very productive fluid-filled respiratory tract. We ended up having to suction fluid out of his trachea about every 5 minutes throughout the 2-hour procedure. The two severe concerning findings were a very severe ventricular arrhythmia, which we assume is due to myocarditis from the virus. And then he also had a pretty significant pneumonia. And we're fortunate to have a computed tomography, a CT machine in our building. So we were able to run a CT on him. And here you can see the infiltrates in his lungs that were designated by CT. He did recover well with all the treatments we administered. And this is an example. We did a recheck exam 2 months later, and you can see on the left side of the screen, you can see the infiltrates, and especially on the ventral, which is the dorsal side, the fluid. And then 2 months later, you can see how much that's cleared up. So he did make a really great recovery. He's still on a lot of cardiac medications for the arrhythmia and overall reduced cardiac function. But he is back with the troop and acting great. We're really pleased with his progress. So that is just a very quick summary of what happened from January to February here in San Diego. I'm happy to answer other questions that people have if there's more details. But that's the story.
Right. Sorry, excuse me. Right. Thank you, Lauren. Very interesting. And I'm sure we have a lot of questions and discussions to talk about the cases. But first of all, I'm glad that the gorillas are now okay and they're doing fine. So that's very good news. And again, congratulations to your team for being able to handle them so finely. Can I ask you first, what do you think as the vet, the biggest challenge you faced during the treatment? What's the most challenging time or aspect when you do the treatment for Winston and other gorillas?
The first challenge was deciding if we needed to act. As you know, most of the gorillas had a nasal discharge, but they were fine. And Winston, he's still an active silverback in a troop. He's actually, I think, the oldest silverback to still be with a family group. And there were some days where he looked very lethargic and other days where maybe he perked up. And we kept wondering, he's going to get through it just like everyone else, right? So that decision that, no, he's not and he needs our help, that was the first big challenge. And then it was all mental. It was, it makes me give so much kudos and props to the healthcare workers who work with COVID positive patients every day, because the ability to get our staff in the right mental place to know that we are going to bring a 400-pound feces covered coughing COVID positive gorilla into our building and work intimately with him for 2 hours to try to save his life. It was a lot. And we actually, the day before, we canceled all of our procedures and we practiced the whole procedure multiple times. We practiced donning and doffing. I think that gave folks a lot of confidence that we would be able to get through the procedure okay. So the mental part was definitely the hardest. It's not easy to lug a gorilla around and get him into the CBT machine. So that was challenging too, but that's, it's like Greg too, right? It's what you do when you're a veterinarian. So that part was, once we were doing it, it was easy. It was the mental thing that was hard.
Yeah. I cannot imagine, and I'm really intrigued to know your anesthesia protocol for the gorilla, but maybe that's for another day.
It was all Tealazol. Yeah, we stayed far away from the alpha 2s, which we're glad we did. So it was basically Tealazol and isoflurane. And he did have a slow recovery, but we expected that. So
yeah, it's better have a slow recovery than spontaneous arousal, right? Yeah. Greg, do you have any comments or questions about the gorilla while we are talking about the challenges of treating the very sick individual in Lauren's case?
Yeah, so yeah, I can agree that the moment when we have to decide that we need to do intervention to them is quite challenging as well, especially when you are dealing with such a big animal, and we all know that there are risks to do anesthesia and etc. So that's a quite big challenge. So, my question is, first, what kind of let's say observations or parameters that you used each day for those groups when they have a positive case. So then you kind of say that, oh yeah, okay, that's this these kids are okay, or then some groups that not really well.
That's a great question, Greg, because we had the same. Communication was also a challenge because the gorillas were in the building. They were positive. We weren't going into the building, so it was all verbal communication from the keepers who were going into the building, caring for them. And I can actually share this document. We can put it in maybe later, but we created a one-page document with all the gorillas' names, and based on the CDC website of the questions they asked: nasal discharge, lethargy, coughing, wheezing. We threw an appetite. We listed it on the side, and we just had yes, no every day. We made it really simple. Every day the keepers filled out one form as a summary of each animal. And that's how I could, that Excel sheet that I showed in my slides, that's how I could complete that so easily. And there's, we have to complete an epidemiologic form for our government. And those pages really help go back and figure out who was coughing when. And if you look at, Winston, he had yes, 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 and we had some gradings like 1 to 5, and he was up at the 4s and 5s. So it was that information. But yeah, it's a really good point, like keeping track every day of who's doing what. That was a really helpful little document we put together.
That's very useful. Thanks, Lauren. And moving on to the case, have you seen any long-term effect of the virus on the group once they are considered healthy after the 3 weeks sickness? How are they doing nowadays?
The group is doing great. What I didn't talk about in the slides was Cami, who's our older female. When we saw how sick Winston was during his exam, we got worried about Cami. And we thought we need to do an exam on her. So we did Winston on a Tuesday. I think we did Cami on that Saturday, same gear up and all that stuff. And she, other than being a little overweight and having some bad teeth, she was completely healthy. And in fact, when we did her nasal swab during her procedure that Saturday, it was negative at that point already. So we do know that we need to go back and work on her teeth at some point. But so the rest of the troop seemed fully recovered. We have done since then. So we did this all happened in January. We did a quick recheck on Winston in March. And then we did another exam on him, I think it was June. So he generally is actually, now that we're addressing his heart condition, he's almost more active than he was even before COVID. So we were able to identify probably some underlying cardiac conditions, decreased cardiac function that we're treating. So he actually we implanted a remote loop recorder over his heart so we can watch his rhythm from remotely, so we can monitor so the arrhythmia seems resolved, and his respiratory signs seem resolved. We've been asked about COVID, the long hauler situation, if we think our gorillas might have that, and we just don't have any way to know, but we haven't seen any instances that make us think they're in a fog or not paying attention or extremely lethargic. So they've been pretty normal.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's interesting information. And moving on, is there any other species of animals that get, infected with COVID or suspected to get COVID as well in your institution? Any news to share besides the gorilla?
Yeah, so we've identified in our institution the species of concern are primates, felids, and mustelids because of all the mink, obviously the mink worldwide that are having so much trouble. And in our, actually, you can find it in the news in the last few weeks. We did have 2 snow leopards that were diagnosed as positive for coronavirus at the San Diego Zoo. And those animals had mild clinical signs, not anything that required intervention, but we're watching closely for a little bit. And that's why they had fecal samples submitted. So they were diagnosed on fecal sample and were being monitored. Interestingly, they live very close to 2 Amur leopards, and those animals were never diagnosed as positive. So it makes us wonder if there's like a species taxa predilection. And then here at the safari park, we do have our tiger troop, our 6 Sumatran tigers are currently in the middle of a coronavirus episode where they are on the mend for the most part, but very similar to Winston. We had a 17-year-old tiger we knew had some kidney insufficiency that we've been watching very closely, and became this close to deciding to do an intervention on him.
Wow.
But he kind of turned the corner at the last minute. And all those tigers were diagnosed via fecal PCR as well. So that the fecal PCR has been a really good tool for us if we have a case we're suspicious of. We're not doing any screening or anything like that. We're just focusing on trying to diagnose clinical cases. And really the importance in that is not even so much intervention for the animals, but it's to be able to provide the proper protection for the people caring for the animals and making sure that they have the right PPE on so they're not exposed. So that's been our drive and wanting to make sure we know what's going on in our wildlife.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very important point to raise, that testing is not just for the sake of the animal that are suspected, but more to prevent transmission to the rest of the population and visitors and the staff and etc. So thank you. And really sorry for the Sumatran tigers. I hope they will be okay soon. Last week in Indonesia, there was also a reported case of COVID in 2 Sumatran tiger. I guess that's the first wildlife reported with COVID in Indonesia, is right, correct? That's the first one,
I think so, yes.
So,
yeah, that's the first case.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask more about vaccination, Lauren, if you might. I understand that in San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, you've been vaccinating some of the high concern species for COVID-19. Can you share the story about this? What are the reasons? How did it go so far?
Sure, and it's not just us, but we've been really happy to be able to be part of the program. So Zoetis is an international veterinary company, and they've worked very hard to create a veterinary SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. So it's just labeled for animals. We did not even think about trying to take vaccines out of the human realm to use on our animals, because obviously it's more important that people are immunized. But now that we have the veterinary vaccine, it's been a great opportunity. So Zoetis has been a tremendous partner to zoos across the U.S. and I'm sure in other parts of the world as well, providing the vaccine. And it is tricky. It's just like the COVID vaccines. It needs to be kept at a very cold temperature. And once you open a bottle for 10 doses, it's only good for 24 hours. So it requires some planning. You know, you can't just do an animal here or there. So at the San Diego Zoo and the Safari Park, we've identified all of our primates, all of our mustelids, which we don't have too many, and our felids, which here at the Safari Park, that's our Sumatran tigers, our lion troop. We have over 30 cheetahs in a breeding situation. And then our smaller cats, black-footed cats, sand cats, ocelots. And then a couple of other carnivores, like our coati, are in an area where they do have a lot of guest exposure. So even though they're not mustelids, we figured they're worth protecting them as well. And then we have our domestic dogs that live with some of our cheetahs who are animal ambassadors. So we've actually vaccinated them too to just help protect our cheetahs. So we actually got all of our susceptible species got their first doses in already, and then it's a 3-week wait time, and then the second dose. And we started on our second round of doses. And down at the zoo, they have all those apes. They have the orangs, the bonobos, the gorillas, and a lot more primates than we do. So they probably have twice as many animals to vaccine, and they're also doing a great job. We felt a sense of urgency with just the increase in COVID cases over the last month. So, it took a little while to get the vaccine, and during that time, there wasn't as much urgency, and now it's like, we got to get these animals protected. We've seen very few, if any, vaccine adverse reactions. We're required to report those right away because the vaccine is still new. So far it's going really well. How well it will protect the animals we don't know that yet. And as we're learning, with the Delta variant, it's protection from illness, but not shedding. So that adds another layer. We don't know if it'll be the same way for the Zoetis vaccine.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I guess one last question for you before I move to talk with Greg and discuss about the situation in Nyaru Menteng. Do you have any advice for the vet teams in Indonesia from your experience responding to COVID-19?
I think your teams in Indonesia are amazing, and I know you guys are doing amazing work with probably not as many resources as you deserve. I think one thing we learned with the gorillas is how important ventilation is. And our gorilla building, we're in a fire zone, so our gorilla building actually has a device that would suck smoke out of the building if there was a fire. We were able to turn that on to greatly increase the ventilation in our building, and I'm just picturing it sucking all the viral particles right out. So when our gorillas were ill, we actually kept doors open to keep ventilation. Just so in your housing situations, if there's ways to increase ventilation, that's always a great thing. And then the big thing we learned is you can't just give PPE to someone who's not medically trained and expect them to know exactly how to use it to stay safe. There's more to just putting a Tyvek suit on. It's where you put it on and where you take it off and what areas you go to and what things you don't do when you're in that situation. So training of people and practicing is a really important part of it too. And then just, doing what you can and creating an index of suspicion for if it's a case and then having a protocol for how to test it.
Interesting. I'm making notes here. Thank you, Lauren. Now moving to Greg, and I'm happy to you, Lauren, to jump into the discussion because we want it to be like an active talk. Greg, can you share to us the measures that you and the BOS team has put in place to protect orangutans in rehab centers against COVID-19?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to share to everyone about this. We kind of defined two measures from humans' perspective and from animals' perspective. So the way of thinking that if we can protect our staff, the humans, from COVID, then our animals won't get the same thing too. So then we start with making a visitor restrictions to all our centers, and we start to continue to do monthly COVID screenings to our staff, and then to make sure that certain areas from our centers is considerably to be safe, especially to because our staff, about 80 to 90% of all our staff are local people, so we want to make sure that the places around our centers is also considered to be safe. So we also gather local people to get the same understandings about how important to keep ourselves safe from COVID, and then we help local people to do a monthly or periodic surveillance about COVID. So we kind of give them a rapid test for people to use. Then we kind of get the idea of what is actually going on around our centers. And from the orangutan perspective, we also do COVID screenings to all of orangutans for several purposes. And if some staff got positive cases or suspected from COVID case, then we also do tracings to our orangutans, and we do COVID tests to them as well. And all of the things won't be happened if we don't form satgas or COVID committee.
Task force.
Yes,
Task force, you
exactly.
say?
Sorry, satgas. Yes, satgas COVID committee at BOS.
Okay.
Yeah, so that those things won't be happening if we don't have committee at our centers, and that's the key point to do most of the things. Yes, I think that's.
Very interesting. So the way I see it, that you first focusing the prevention on the human first as a source of infection. Yeah. So you try to protect your staff and including the local communities as well. Get them under under surveillance. I mean, help them with getting screening tests and other measures, so that by protecting the local community, you are protecting the animal. I think that's a really good concept. Now, with the orangutans at BOS Foundation, are there any groups, any particular groups that you see at having a high risk of getting COVID in rehab centers, either in Nyaru, Menteng or in Samboja, based on your knowledge?
Yeah, sure. So groups that are having access to for school and having access to get contact with staff, for instance, orangutans that are going to the forest school with babysitters or orangutan technicians. Every day there are groups that is having the highest risk to get COVID transmission from humans. So the other groups, like orangutans from Paris Islands, for instance, are having a lower chance to get infected, because people are just having enough distance or even far away distance to just have throw food and everything and do observation from distance. So orangutans from islands are not having that kind of a big risk compared to orangutans from forest school.
I see.
And orangutans in the cages as well. At the cages, orangutan at the cages. Yes.
Right. So you're saying that those that are of high risk orangutans that are in the forest school stage, and for the audience, that forest school in BOS Foundation and most other rehab centers in Indonesia is kind of a place where orangutans and human are kind of mingled or stay in the same environment. So that's why you think they are at high risk, because they're having a very close contact with human or the caretakers, right, Greg? And those that you think are of lower risk are those that are on the pre-release islands. So those who are already have very limited contact with the caretakers.
Yes.
And as well as those who are in the cage. And what about, like Lauren mentioned, that based on their case in the gorilla, the elderly ones get really sick. Are you concerned about the older orangutans that you care for, or those who probably has a comorbidity like we see in human population?
Actually, I forgot to ask that question to Lauren, but I really want to know that later.
You answer.
So yes, besides all the age aspect, we also are looking for the comorbid, like you said, especially when it comes to respiratory problem history that they have in the past. So we kind of make a note with orangutan that has this kind of problems in the past. Then besides of course we are watching all of orangutans, but we kind of have special notification for those kind of groups. But so far, there are no big change or big impact that we have for those groups.
So your question is, can you summarize, Greg?
No, so I'm
answering my question, right?
Yes, I'm answering it. Yes, I'm answering your questions. So probably the same questions to Lauren. I don't know if I'm allowed to now. I asked the same questions to. Yeah. So you said before about the age differences that might have different severity to your gorillas, but do those individuals have kind of respiratory problems in the past that you think it might affect the severity, or is there already such thing? Or?
Well, fortunately, our gorillas that in our troop don't have any history of respiratory disease. So it's just Winston with his, he's a 49-year-old silverback, so some degree of cardiac. But what was interesting, I'm glad you brought this up because I forgot to mention it, is we have 2 young males that are just kind of becoming silverbacks. So they're at a pretty stressful time in their lives. And they were, after our older 2, our silverback and our grandma, they were the next group that were most affected. They didn't require intervention, but they had a few days where they were pretty lethargic. So I wonder if, social status is also something to consider if they're in that kind of stressy period where they're part of the troop, but they're not part of the troop, and they want to act tough, but they want their mom, that kind of thing. If that was something for us that, whereas like the 30-year-old ladies were fine. They coughed a couple times and we're good to go. So yeah, I think, and then our grandma, her biggest comorbidity was obesity. And you hear a lot in the news about how that's a significant comorbidity, but in her case, it didn't end up causing her problems, but that was definitely a concern for us.
Okay.
Right, so better watch the orangutans, yeah?
Yes.
From obesity and other diseases. And then Greg, so you mentioned that you do screen test orangutans for COVID. How do you do it?
So we have antigen test, and the gold standard is that we do the PCR test using nasopharyngeal swab and oropharyngeal swab. But also at the same time, we also do an antigen test. So it's kind of like
sample?
For antigen test, just nasopharyngeal swab, not oropharyngeal swab. Yeah, but at the same day. So you kind of do like 2 things at almost the same time because they are under anesthetized. So, but for the antigen test, it's kind of a bit like because up until today, like we kind of not really sure about how this antigen test will give us a better results or anything to determine COVID-19 or whatever in orangutans. So it's kind of the reason why we do rapid test antigen is just to, if we get positive results or negative results, then we kind of know the validity of this kit by watching the result of the PCR test. But the gold standard is still the PCR test.
Right.
And did you say they were anesthetized samples, not
For younger for the kids, they can be we can just handle them, but for bigger orangutans, no.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So you test the orangutans based on if they had a history of being in contact with any keepers or caretakers who are positive with COVID, and so it's kind of screening. So you test a lot of orangutans, and you use antigen rapid test, but the gold standard is still PCR.
Yes, and we also plus we watch for the clinical signs that might appear. Yeah, and then we also determined about the time of the best time that when we need to take the samples. So we kind of like doing tracing from what is the last time they have contact with the positive results from staff, and then we kind of like doing then three days after that, and then we do serial. But if we do anesthetizations because of the animal welfare reasons, so we just have to do it once for all, and we send the samples.
Interesting. And now that we heard the story from San Diego Zoo that they use fecal sample to do PCR tests, will you consider that? And is it applicable to be done in Indonesia to the best of your knowledge?
Yes. For the fecal sample test, I think that's very favorable when we need to kind of know a surveillance for our populations, because we have like several orangutans from the same cage, so we kind of, because it's easier to take fecal samples than to swab test. So by doing that, then I think we kind of know the overall conditions of what happens inside the centers, and I think that's applicable also. Yeah, we can do like sampling, or is that also the San Diego Zoo too? Like you do samplings every month or every is there a timeline to do the screenings for all the animals?
So our cases, like our snow leopards, our gorillas, and our tigers, we are doing twice weekly fecals to try to understand when the viral load goes down in their feces, to help us understand when we can step down our PPE, and also when we can allow the habitat to be open to the public again. So we do screening that way, but in our situation, we aren't screening animals that aren't clinically ill. And in your situation, I could see how valuable that would be, if to know that you have animals in your rehab situation that are positive, so you can act accordingly. In our situation, we don't have our lab doesn't have the capacity, and we don't have the strategy to screen all of our potentially susceptible animals. Now, the interesting question, I think your strategy for testing animals that might have been with a positive, keeper or trainer, that's a really good one that we'll have to talk about here. It hasn't happened yet, but if in the future, if we found out a person caring for an animal was positive, would we wait for that animal to look sick, or would we start screening them like you're talking about? That's definitely something we'll talk about here.
Yeah, interesting.
So we kind of make like we like adopt the rules of when the best time that we take the samples. We adopt it from human health perspective. So we kind of like adopt that and try to use that to orangutans with kind of like adjusted stuff that we need to adjust, because we can't really adopt roughly from the human health perspective to our orangutans. But the principle is actually if we do like antigen test, then at least we have to do it like serial or like um, within 7 days or 10 days, and we have to do it like twice. If the orangutans are not demanded to be anesthetized, or we can just handle them. But if like we need to sedate them, then we can just do it once, like within 7 days or like 10 days after the contact. And we do not wait for them to be sick before we, start to do the thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's important. Somewhere how I see it, both Nyaru Menteng, both Samboja, and other orangutan rehabilitation centers, they house this single species in a very connected environment, and it's pretty much we're human and the orangutans or the great apes, they're sharing the same environment. So treating them as one population is basically, the concept of One Health and how we can prevent disease transmission and make everyone in the environment healthy. Yeah. So and I can imagine how hard your work in Nyaru Menteng, Greg, you and your team doing screening for the staff, the orangutans.
Like we have to put our eyes to like 300 orangutans. Around 300 orangutans. So yeah, but we're okay. I'm fine.
We're okay.
We're okay.
Why you wanted to do this panel so we could sit down for 45 minutes.
Yes.
Right.
And yeah, could I mention some reasons why we need to screen the orangutans for COVID? Is actually other than just when they get close contact with positive stuff, but we also do COVID screening for new arrivals. We start to do that, and then we need to do this COVID screen test also for when we have to move the orangutans from the main area to Callison Islands. So transferring, when we need to transfer them, so we have to check for the COVID again. And if the most important one is if we want to release them back to the forest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. That's the best strategy to keep the wild population stay away from COVID. So
Yes.
You do a lot of testing, and say you have a positive orangutan. Do you have a plan in place to care for them and manage the situation?
Yeah. So ever since March last year, so we have one facility which is located a bit separated with other facilities. So this facility is used to be a quarantine area for release candidates, but we are no longer using that for that purpose. So we switch that area to be prepared for isolation area. For those positive individuals that we might get in the future, which we hope that we won't use the area at all. So we can prepare the area, and then we have made strict protocols when we are taking care of positive individuals. And yeah, probably the big challenge also, that's why I asked Lauren a few minutes ago that what kind of parameters that we see from the positive individuals to make sure that they are okay, they are not okay. So that probably will be a challenge for us as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Final question to Greg before we have to close this discussion. Although I'm sure there are many other questions that need to be discussed, but yeah. Anyway, the last question is for you, Greg, and this is representing your whole team in Nyaru Menteng. What have been the physical or emotional or even financial strains on the BOS staff and orangutans in your care nowadays?
Well, we have, so for the physical strain, so we have faced some positive results from staff. So we have to quarantine them. They're not allowed to work. So by then, all the people should replace their work. So that means they are overworked from from everywhere, from different divisions, which also affect their mentals. And also for the orangutans as well, it's kind of sad for us. It's kind of heartbreaking because because of this adjust health protocols, we need to reduce their time to go to the forest school because we have to minimize the contact from animal to humans, and we divide people to be different groups. So we want to also make a distance from every people, every group, so we are not like in one group, one big group, just like we are used to. So that also affects our social social life as well. Then that kind of really reduced the number of how many people that working at the same time. So it really changed our somehow the mode of, yes, yes, it really. And for the financials, well, to do the screen test for humans, for staff, and I've mentioned before that we helped local communities to do also screen tests. That also quite requiring some money, and also we do like PCR tests for orangutans that also requires a lot of money, because sadly when the tracing happens, sometimes you can get like 20 orangutans at the same time, or like dozens of orangutans at the same time, and we need to perform a PCR test for those individuals, and that requires a lot of money. And I think that's hard for everyone, but we, like I said, we are okay. We're okay. No, I'm kidding. We are okay.
Okay.
It's been hard for everyone, but yeah, we have to do it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much to both of you for sharing your stories, experience, and knowledge. I guess for us here, the panelists, this sharing kind of give us new insights of what's happening on the other side of the globe, what is happening here, how we can adjust, how we can use the experience to better up ourselves. So appreciate your participation in this. I guess we have to admit that this pandemic is indeed a very challenging, very difficult time for us. We are not just worrying about ourselves and our life, which already very heavy, but we also have to think about the animals that we care about. So many things that we don't know yet on the effect of COVID-19 to the animals, to great apes, to felines, to other species of wildlife, what could happen to them. But yeah, having this connection with other people, having this network, I suppose it helps a lot with sharing experience again and sharing knowledge. And yeah, I guess we just have to do our best for now and hope that the pandemic will soon be over. So again, yeah, thank you very much again to Lauren. Have a good day ahead for you, and thank you to
have a good night sleep to both of you.
Yes. Thank you to Greg for
Thank you.
setting aside your midnight time to talk with us. So yeah, just want to say that you guys are doing amazing jobs. I'm sure this talk hopefully will inspire many more people to appreciate and be more involved in the conservation of wildlife. So thank you. Happy International Orangutan Day, and goodbye, everyone.
All right, so thanks for sticking with us through that tough discussion. It's difficult to talk about the pandemic, but it's certainly important. We want you to know that through it all, we absolutely have not lost sight of our goal, and that is getting the orangutans through the rehabilitation process and back to the forest. And we know you love it when you get to see some of that in action. And so we wanted to just kind of lighten the mood a little bit and bring you some really fun clips from Orangutan Jungle School, some that you may have seen, some never before seen footage of a few of your favorite Orangutan Jungle School students. So enjoy this little break for all of us.
And just a reminder, if you haven't seen the incredible series Orangutan Jungle School, you can catch it on the Smithsonian Channel in the US. And around the world, you can look up to see if it's in your network. And with that, enjoy.
Duduk.
He is a fat orangutan and he needs diet.
Please don't give Benny any milk at all.
Benny nanti belakangan Benny. Jadi kamu lihat. Ngomot.
Arga, tell me about Benny now. What stage is he at?
Yeah, actually, our Benny, stop it. Yeah. It's flirting.
What did he just do?
Yeah, it's just flirting. Like, just in front of me. Can you smell it?
Yes.
As long as you're happy, ya, son. Dadah, Benny. Oh, because they have food. That's why you go there, because they have food. You don't want to miss the party. Oh, Benny.
Well, we really hope you enjoyed that video. It's such a wonderful view into our rescue centers and watching Silly Benny and Spunky Chinta and, oh, sweet Copperel, as they go through their daily routines and learn the lessons that they need, either to live out in the wild or on our sanctuary islands. Copperel is such a heartwarming story for us. When Copperel arrived, it was hard to believe that Copperel could have quality of life after what he went through. But now to see him now and to see him climbing trees and doing everything that which he couldn't do before, it's just amazing. And to get a lot more footage like that, we want you to go to Orangutan Jungle School and watch our series. We have 2 seasons out. If you're in the US, that's on the Smithsonian Channel. And for those watching around the world, if you go to orangutanjungleschool.com, you can learn if it's airing in your country. So there's a lot more footage like that, hours, and it's such binge watching TV that you'll definitely want to see it. But now we're going to shift a little bit here from the silly to the serious, and that's because we get asked a lot about understanding orangutans. And as a science-based organization, we not only want to understand orangutans from the behavioral side, but we also want to understand orangutans, the species, and that's important for us in the rescue centers, but also for our post-release monitoring teams in the wild when we're monitoring orangutans on their journey back into the wild. So for this reason, we put together an amazing talk for you that Debbie's going to talk to you about now.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Yeah, like Ben said, we get these questions all the time about what are natural orangutan behaviors and really what's that like for them in the rainforest. So we wanted to bring in some experts who could really speak to those questions that you have. So we're going to hand it off to Andrea Knox, and Andrea is from the BOS Foundation, and she's going to sit down and speak with 2 wild orangutan behavioral experts, and that's Dr. Felicity Oram and Sheila Karisma-Dewey. And I think they'll give you a lot of insights into wild orangutans and just orangutans in general. So enjoy.
Welcome everyone to the second session of the Meet Our Cousins event, Deciphering the Behavior of Orangutans. I am Andrea Knox. I'm the International Communications and Research Advisor at the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to 2 very special guests we have with us here today. We have Dr. Felicity Oram, who is the Project Director of the PONGO Alliance, the Program Development Advisor of HUTAN's Kinabatangan Orangutan Conservation Program, and a member of the IUCN Primate Specialist Group for Human-Primate Interactions. And then I also have with me Sheila Karisma-Dewey, who is the coordinator for monitoring and scientific survey of biodiversity for the Sumatran Orangutan Conservation Program under Yayasan Ecosystem Lestari, and is currently based in North Sumatra. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us for this very special Orangutan Day event.
It's wonderful to be here, and happy International Orangutan Day, everyone, all over.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here. Hello, everyone.
So I just want to jump straight into it, but with an easy question so our audience can get to know you both. I think you're both new to the BOS Foundation virtual events that we've been launching all year. So if you could both just tell us all a little bit, maybe how you came to work with orangutans and what your research focuses on. Maybe start with you, Felicity.
Okay, well, I started for a long part of my career as actually a zookeeper looking after orangutans in captivity. And then I got the opportunity to work in the field, and I really jumped with both feet to that. And I was able to work on a master's and a PhD with fantastic collaborators in HUTAN and the local staff there that taught me an awful lot about wild orangutans. And now I look actually specializing orangutans in human changed environments. So orangutans living in degraded forests and forests that are very fragmented, mostly by oil palm plantations. So I work how orangutans are adapting to that type of change. And then I equally, because really this is all about people as well, I work with the people to try to see if we can work together to keep wild orangutans in the Kinabatangan region of Sabah, which is North Borneo.
That's fantastic. Here at BOS Foundation, we really resonate with that. Say it's not a orangutan or environmental problem and not a human problem. It's a problem for all of us. And the solution should benefit orangutans and people alike. That's good to hear. You, Sheila?
Yeah, I'm a very rookie actually compared to Felicity about orangutans because at first it started from my undergraduate thesis. So I study about mother and infant orangutans for my undergraduate. So I graduated in 2018. So I basically just worked with orangutans for about 4 years. So after I graduated from my university, I started working in the field as well in Batang Toru research stations. I work as a manager there. So I basically live in the forest and then follow the wild population of Tapanuli orangutans. And my research is basically focused on the mother and infant behavior, especially in the foraging skill learning, learning about how the immature Tapanuli orangutans acquire their ability to forage and then how to process their foods. And as the longer I'm in the camp, I also learn and studies about their relationship within the mother and the infant.
That's amazing. And I'm happy you pointed it out, Sheila, that you and Felicity, you're different stages of your careers, but that's part of what makes us so exciting, right? Bringing people from different backgrounds and different stages of life in their career and all coming together to try to find a solution to a complex problem. We need people coming together.
Well, it's wonderful also to, and makes me very happy, Sheila, that you're interested in mother and child and growing up orangutan, because that's very much the sort of main interest that I have. And what I did for my master's is quite a bit similar to what you did for your bachelor's work and the work that you're doing. And so, I mean, it's all really about making a world for a future for those orangutans growing up and learning how they I had quite a lot of experience in captivity, and those orangutans don't have to feed themselves, so learning how they learn to feed and learn to forage on their own is really a core part of my master's as well. So it's really great joy that I have some young person who's interested to do what I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially if we see the connection between the mother and the infant, and then we see their level of attention, their level of communication and interaction between the mother and the infant. It's really interesting to learn. It's like we're seeing, reflecting ourselves in them. So yeah, it's really, really interesting.
It's such a close bond, but since you both do focus on such similar research, could you share with the audience how important is the mother's role in infants learning how to survive and in their development. What are they needed for? How does that work? Could you share what you've learned during your time with orangutans? That's a big question.
Well, I think that the simple answer is everything. Because an orangutan raises one baby all the way through 0 to 7, and then has another one, but the other one, that other one is still around from 7 to 14. So unlike people and chimpanzees, we don't have what's called stacking of births. So we're really taking one all the way through the process, one at a time. So the relationship between a mother orangutan and her offspring is very close, kind of what Sheila hinted at when she was saying before. And I really think that orangutan babies aren't born with a lot of skills to survive in the forest. So it's all about learning that from their mother.
Yeah, it's so true, because you can say that since the orangutans live in a solitary lifestyle, they only interact with, when they're first born, their early interaction is only with the mother. So basically the mother is the role model. Everything that they need to learn to survive when they become independent, they learn from the mother. So the role more importance, the mother is really an important role in the infant life of orangutans, because there's several hypotheses that we said that the orangutans needs, in order to survive when they become independent, they need to learn how to find the food, they need to learn what they can eat or what they couldn't eat, and then they need to learn how to move, and then they need to learn how to build nests. Those are the several crucial skills they need to acquire when they grow up, and all of that they learn from the mother.
So I think all these skills are so important for orangutans. Have any of you ever seen cases, can these young orangutans survive without their mothers? Or it's really, crucial that they have them there? Like, have you seen, what's the earliest you've seen a young orangutan leave their mother in the wild, or does that not really seen? Are you really only seeing them with their mothers until they're 7, 8 years old?
In my experience, they don't. It's a little bit of, well, it's a bit dramatic, but before 7, it doesn't happen naturally. In the field site where I work, the real sort of barrier, or not the barrier, I mean the sort of landmark that they're gone from the stage of all depending on their mother to being a bit more independent, is when they make their own first nest, and that's at the time of weaning, which is around 7.5 years old. And then shortly thereafter, the mother will often have another baby. But at the same time, the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, they're still around in their mother's area. And so but the female will stay in her mother's area for the rest of her life, and the male will leave, usually around 15, the mother's area. So the real sort of landmark of growing up is that time when they make their first nest. And I've seen 2 times when that has happened. I've been really lucky to witness that. And one time it looked almost magical, to the point that we thought maybe there was something wrong. All of a sudden, the daughter, which was quite a dependent daughter, went off and didn't come back in the evening, and wasn't very far away. But another time, it seemed like the daughter was a little bit trying to get back into her mother's nest. Mother was getting out, sitting outside her nest, and it was like this back and forth process, and then she sort of was kind of, if I can be anthropomorphic, say she sort of stamped off and made her own nest. So it's different, there's a lot of different personalities too. But to answer your question, I haven't. The normal process is to stay until they build their own nest, and that's usually around 7 years old.
Yeah.
In the wild.
in the wild, I also never witnessed a case of an infant growing up without a mother, or maybe we don't know if they're adopted by another adult orangutans, but usually the case, the mother is really protective to the baby, and the mother is gonna do anything to ensure the survival of the offspring. And I don't know, but in the rehabilitation site, maybe we've seen like young orangutans being like with their, I don't know, they have partners maybe like orphan orangutans in the rehabilitation. How does that work, Felicity?
Well, I don't actually work in rehabilitation that much, and so I think that well, let's see how to take a step back to answer originally the question, which is, I think it's very difficult for orangutan to survive without a mother below the age of 3 or 4. I do know of some cases of orangutans that we didn't know for sure because we didn't know exactly how old they were, but they seemed like they were younger than they should be, that were alone. And so I don't think that there's cases where you don't have orphans. And in fact, I do know some cases of where we do have orphans, but I don't know, I don't think it's easy for them. But I think that if they're maybe 5 or 6, or closer to 7, they can maybe do okay, because of course they're also living in the wild. They're living in a community of their aunties, their female cousins. So really, though orangutans are solitary, they're still living in a community. So perhaps they are supported enough. But I think that if you're much younger, and certainly below the age of 3, where you're really depending on the nutritional support from your mother, because really from about the whole first year, you're being carried by your mother mostly as a baby. And then between 1 and 3, wild orangutans really focus on learning how to move around. And but they play with food, but they're really not interested in eating it that much. But after 3, they become much more focused on learning what to eat. So it's sort of the different stages of focus. But so I think that if you're between 4 and 7, you're going to be deficient a little bit on foraging skill if you lost your mother, but you're going to have something. But below that, I think you're quite in difficulty. But and of course, many of the orangutans that come into rehabilitation centers are very young, and so they probably wouldn't survive in the wild on their own.
Yeah, it's true. I see several cases of the close relationship between the orangutans, like the first offspring and then the second offspring.
Yeah.
Like when the mother have second offspring, the first offspring sometimes came around and then play with the second offspring. That happens a lot in the wild, especially if the offspring is a female. The male, they don't really come around, but the female offspring usually come back to the mother and then sometimes play with their sister or their brother. It's really interesting.
Yes, yeah, and that's amazing. In fact, as a former zookeeper, that was always really amazing to me, because zookeepers always wonder, how do female orangutans learn how to be a mother if they're just alone with their mother, and then and of course that's exactly how they learn. And I completely agree with you, and I see the same thing where it's much the sons come back and play too, but it's really the daughters who are quite interested, and so this is the time to be learning what you do, and it's really, it's wonderful to watch, and
Happy to say we have that with our rehabilitant ones as well, that are already released into the forest, and we have mothers with multiple children. We see it with the sons as well, but the daughters definitely stick around. Not all, different personalities. But you guys actually both touched upon why I asked that question in the first place and why it came to mind, because of the orangutans in our rehabilitation centers. Most of them come in well before the age of 7. We're talking 1 or 2 years old. So we needed what we call our human surrogate mothers to fulfill the role of their mother so they can survive in the wild one day. But in this process, we're constantly trying to improve it because obviously human surrogate mothers are not orangutans. So we're always learning. So from your experience, what would you say have you seen the most effective way in which young and mature orangutans learn and acquire skills? Is it just through watching or mimicry? Are there other learning tools at their disposal that you see them using in wild situations with their actual orangutan mothers? Or with their siblings too. We always focus on that as well. In our forest school, we are more social, but we like them learning from each other, from their pupils, in lieu of their mother.
Well, I think that they learn mostly by watching. I think there's different personalities in the different orangutan mothers. Mostly, so I think it's really watching, but it's sort of, they don't do sort of active lessons, but you can tell that they're giving the opportunity. So the young will, when they're really small and they can't open any fruit or anything on their own, they take it out of their mother's mouth, and they're sort of all over. And some mothers are more tolerant of that than others. Some sort of say, "You sit down and I'll give you some." Others don't mind, their baby all over their face. And I have noticed it's kind of be a personality difference with that. So I think it's not exactly passive in that the mother's not doing anything, but she's not sort of sitting them down and saying, this is how you use a knife and fork kind of thing. So so that's and then my personal feeling is that orangutans are not as focused on learning from a sibling or a conspecific, so somebody the same age as them, as other apes are. I mean, I think gorillas learn a lot from playing with their other other ones about the same age. I think orangutans have a little bit of a disadvantage at that. I mean, that's all you can do in a rehabilitation center is and they do form like real buddies, and I'm sure they benefit from that. They're really intelligent. They know, they're adaptive. But I think it's a little bit less natural for them to be learning from somebody their own age. They're quite focused on learning from one individual, like their mother, in my opinion. But I shouldn't be let you have her.
Yeah, it's exactly true that from my experience, orangutan is learning by observing. So they watch closely of what the mothers do, and then they try it themselves. Or if they couldn't do that yet, the mother's gonna allow them to steal the food, or the mother share the food, like Felicity said. So it's exactly true that the basically what baby orangutan does to learn is by watching, by seeing what they do, seeing what they eat, seeing how they move, and then the mother, they know the capacity of the baby. So as younger as the baby, the mother tolerance is higher, and then later on, when the baby is already like, if let's say the infant's like 5, 6, 7, and then the level of tolerance is gonna way lower than what it used to be. And then the mothers is also helping with the locomotion, like how to crossing the trees, and then like helping them to get to one tree to another trees. So yeah, and then it's also from what I see, what the sibling does with the another babies, they usually just play. I mean, they don't really learning anything at the activity. They don't really see how they eat, because basically it's just the mother.
Yeah.
It's interesting you brought up locomotion. So our forest school lessons, we focus on a lot. A lot of it is foraging, right? That's most of what an orangutan spends their day doing. It's recorded orangutans have eaten over 2,000 different species of food items in the forest across all different populations. So our surrogate mothers can, show them how to peel back rattan, how to find ants, smash logs for termites, all of that. When it comes to locomotion, that's a bigger challenge, right? we do have them climbing trees, encouraging orangutans to go up. We found fruit kebabs too, fruit on sticks higher up. But teaching those orangutans how to climb is really important, right? They live the life, their entire lives in the trees. The world's largest arboreal mammal is a fact we like to throw out there a lot, and it's surprising. They're much bigger than any bird you see. Do you have, I guess maybe what I'd ask for advice for surrogate mothers or anyone who's trying to teach an orangutan how to climb, essentially, or what's important in that process for them learning and becoming competent and confident in the canopy when they're so far off the ground?
Well, I think it's not so much climbing, it's extremely difficult for a human to teach an orangutan to be an arboreal animal, and that's a major challenge. But the thing is that it's really crossing between trees and understanding what branch and the sort of architecture of trees and how to negotiate through that arboreal pathway. That's the thing that when I look at rehabilitants, in fact, sometimes when I'm in Sabah, we have in some places that are near Sepalok, in some oil palm plantations, we have rehabilitants and wild. We have to, and when you're going to mediate a situation, it's very different if it's a rehabilitant versus if it's a wild orangutan. And one of the things that gives me a clue it might be a rehabilitant is that they're not very good at moving and crossing between things. They're not as good. And so I have to say, I that's one of my tools that I use to say, I don't think this animal, it might not be a wild animal. Because one thing that I suppose the most active teaching thing that I've ever seen a mother do is it seems like they have rules with about 3-year-olds that the mother will sway the tree so that one tree can cross to the other, and the young one's job is to climb up higher and cross over first, because the top of when she's swaying the tree, it's going to sway, and then it's going to go over, and the baby's got to. And I've seen a mother go sway. Now she looks up, like, you go. The baby doesn't go. Okay, so it's sway again, go. And that's the most sort of overt, like, okay, you were supposed to go then, kind of clue. So I think that sort of climbing is one thing and is important, but that sort of making that, if anything, I could say for advice for rehab, it is somehow working, sort of that sort of horizontal pathway. How do you teach that is the thing through the trees, moving through the trees and between the trees. I don't know if I'm sure what you have to add, Sheila.
That's mostly what the mothers do in the wild. So they bend branches, and then if the gap is really far from one tree to another tree, and then the baby couldn't cross it, the mother's gonna bend a little bit so the baby can cross over, or like Felicity said, they're gonna swing one like small trees, and then so the baby can goes up and then cross over. Or sometimes as they grow older, the mothers if the baby cried, sometimes the baby cried because they couldn't cross over, right? When the baby cried, the mothers take a few times to wait, like, you could figure this out on your own. If you couldn't, like, for such a period of time, then I'm gonna come wait for you. But you have to think for yourself for a few moments before I'm gonna help you. So that also happens in the wild. So we when I see that, I understand that the mother is giving the baby the opportunity to think for themselves how to figure out the canopy, how they can cross it, how to solve that problem. So if the baby really couldn't, then the mother's gonna help, but the mother's really giving that chance for the baby to think.
Which makes me think, from like my personal experience, you mentioned your mothers being less tolerant when the babies are older and things too. I've seen, and I wonder if you two have both seen it, mothers being less tolerant and giving more time to let them cry and forget themselves when it's a second or third offspring too, right? Coddling more the first, and then when they've You haven't seen that one, Felicity?
Well, no, I have. I've had the great privilege to see mother with different offspring, and it's pretty amazing. Well, I mean, we think it's amazing. It's normal. You treat each baby is different, and I've seen a mother with a baby who is quite clingy, you know, and more sort of teary. And then the following baby was completely opposite, was very confident. In fact, she was holding it back, you know, and watch her be kind of quite different with quite different offspring. So they adjust to what the personality type is and the skill level of the baby. But exactly what Sheila says, I also watch that kind of instruction of, especially with moving. Exactly that sort of sense of, well, I think you can figure it out, you know, sort of that, and maybe you can. And if you really can't, you know, then the arm goes out. Okay, I'll give you a bridge, and then the baby knows it's been it. And so that's.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine how we can get human surrogate mothers to do bridging in trees. I think it'd be really hard with feet that grasp.
Well, I think you know, I think encouraging them to cross between the trees, because what I have observed is they're trying to get them to go up in the trees, which is quite difficult because everything that's fun is happening on the ground for a rehabilitant. So getting them up, but then they just want them up. And what you really need to do is then start walking away, so that they start having to follow you side across, you know, to actually have to figure out how to cross. And maybe the you know, I know that in some places they they have people up on climbing gear and all that kind of stuff, and at least you would have some idea of what the pathways might be, or even, you know, putting pathways up higher. Because I mean, orangutan, even in captivity, orangutans are really 3D oriented. They like and so they do have that naturally in them, sort of to think of the world in this very sort of 3D puzzle. So encouraging that somehow, I think, would be helpful. And
yeah, I agree.
So would you, one thing we always say, I mentioned, we always want to get better, and the way to do that is by looking at where weaknesses are in a program. Would you, I guess from your experience, peg locomotion as the biggest weakness of rehabilitation programs? Or is there anything else we should also be improving?
Well, I think that what people do in rehabilitation is hard work. And I think it's very honorable work, and it can be very sad, and so my heart is very much with you. But I think that it's very difficult to replace an orangutan mother. So I think, yes, locomotion is a big thing, and I sort of was focusing on that. But I don't think I think that rehabilitants probably don't have as broad a knowledge of what there is to eat out there, and orangutans tend not to be very experimental. I mean, monkeys are very good at being experimental, so if they watch monkeys, maybe that's good. And orangutans are really smart and adaptable, so they can learn more things. But it is maybe their repertoire of what to eat is not as big. So I mean, so all in all, I think that really the wild population is our reservoir of orangutans. Our rehabilitant population are there because we are doing the right thing by them, and we need to do the right thing by them and do our very best. But we can't really think of them as is fully functional population. The fully functional population is still the wild population, and that is not that there can be amazing things happen, or not that the work that you do isn't very honorable, but I think we all have to face that reservoir of knowledge and cultural knowledge and the depth of knowledge that a wild orangutan has is really important, especially in changing environments, and what we're all facing, changing environments. Yeah, I mean, I think the process has really improved tremendously over time. We do it better and better, but I think it's a very challenging job.
Yeah, I agree. It is really difficult because what the mother orangutans do is not just showing them what they can eat or how to eat it, but they also telling them where to find it and when to find it. So in the forest, they have the phenological cycle. Sometimes there are fruit here, sometimes there are fruit here, and then when let's say the fruit availability is low, what they can eat, what other fallback food that they can consume beside fruits, and that's also what the wild mother orangutan teach to their babies, to their infants. So let's say we see that the orangutans in the rehabilitation already, I mean, they eat well, they move well, but then when we release them in the wild, I don't really see how we can ensure that they know where to move, and then they know where to find their food, and then what they should do if there's fruit shortage in their area. Like, that's also be a challenge, actually.
Referring to the site-specific knowledge, especially for females where they stay in the same area as their mother. But for males, do you think that since they are ranging away from their original home range that they grew up in, do you think it's a different skill set they almost acquire, where they're able to explore this new area that they don't know where the fruiting trees are yet? Because orangutans have one of the best temporal spatial maps of any animal on Earth, right? They can remember where the tree is and when it blooms. But when males move into new areas, they don't have that. I think there's something you can maybe tap into there to help rehabilitate orangutans once they're released and they are in a new area, apply those skills more robustly.
I think that's a really interesting thing, and actually in the work that I've been doing now, since my PhD and master's work was all in the protected forest in a fixed border study site, so that was mostly females. So and that's the problem of all fixed border study sites. The males are passing through, so you don't know them as well as you know the females. But and what I'm doing now, which is working in the bigger landscape, I am learning much more about males, and I realize that we don't know very much about males. And I do think that I think unflanged males in particular are definitely more risk taking and more maybe don't know what they're doing, because one of the things is when you mostly study females, you go, wow, these orangutans know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what to do in the day. They have a very good routine. And to a similar degree of flange males, you always have this idea when you see them in the plantations that they know where they're going. They have a plan. Now, unflanged males, which I'm now experiencing more and more, some of them you go, I don't think they have any idea what they're going to do next. So which is a kind of a new experience to watching, obviously a wild orangutan that's kind of like sort of, he's going around in circles here. I don't know what he's doing. So and definitely doing things that you wouldn't expect them to do, or doing things that going round and round again the same day into somebody's orchard. It's not smart, but this unflanged male is doing it, those kind of things. So I do think you make a good point, Andrea, that when we're looking especially at female orangutans that in the wild live in their ancestral home with their female social structure, they are in a very tight community, actually, whereas unflanged males that are leaving that home, they do have a different experience, and that may actually parallel, and they may be and we may not be giving orangutans enough credit that unflanged males survive and they figure it out. So I think they survive and figure it out, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really observed a lot of male orangutans, but I think it's back to their different personalities, I guess. Like we all know that orangutans have different personalities. Sometimes they wander around, sometimes they can explore far away from their home range, from their when they're born. And yeah, I think it's also back with their personalities.
That's very true. So right now we have about 400 different orangutans in our rehabilitation centers. I think we could say with a lot of confidence we have about 400 different personalities. So we keep mentioning personality, and we try to say it a lot too, and it really matters. They're just as different as any two humans.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What's the sex ratio of those four? You know, do you have more males or more females? What do you have?
That's a good question. At the top of my head, I do have to say I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. Our numbers are shifting, though, unfortunately, where we're having a larger male bias with the years, because we've had over 2,000 orangutans come through our centers, and since 2012, we've released 485 orangutans, and that has been more females than males just because of distribution, right? We can't release as many males in the same area as females because females have smaller home ranges. So there's more males in our center, more of our unreleasable orangutan population is male. As well, larger flange males who were rescued later in life who lacked the survival skills. Because we don't release orangutans for several reasons. And unfortunately, one of it is orangutans who just don't have what it takes to survive in the wild. And we do hope that, you know, if we could do something and by some miracle they do gather those skills, we can release them. So if you have tips for that, that'd be wonderful. How to teach a 20-year-old flange male skills he never had in the 10 years he spent in captivity before coming to our centers, things like that. So our ratio is becoming more skewed, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's. I think a lot. Well, yeah, I'm not sure a lot of captive. Well, it's different personalities, but because one of the questions beforehand that you sent to us, I thought was very intriguing about, you know, sort of what a captive orangutan like to. And I'm flashing back to some of my captive one that I think I said, I don't think some of those guys would want to do the work it takes to be a wild orangutan. You know, it's somewhat easier. But then the other thing is that I do know, you know, some captive orangutans might like the autonomy, you know, and you know, not have to be living under the rules of a person. So yeah, I think, I mean, again, that's a huge challenge and a tremendously honorable responsibility, and it's not cheap to do that. And so it's and to have to be doing more than one thing at a time. You're trying to rehabilitate to release some animals, and then you're also having to, how do you enrich a life of an animal that has to stay in captivity? So that's an even bigger job that's on your plate. So yeah, it's quite a challenge. Yeah. But I think that's one of the take-home messages I think we all learn, I've learned in a long time, and I'm very impressed with all the observations already that Sheila has for having a shorter time looking at orangutans. But they always are going to surprise you. They're immensely tenacious animals. It's one of the things I love about them. So you never can say, you know, I wouldn't give up on anyone because they'll surprise you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very true. And I do want to comment, you mentioned a couple of times, Felicity, that this is a big challenge rehabilitating orangutans. And we have other big challenges as well. And we do see orangutan conservation as a multifaceted approach, right? So rehabilitation, hopefully it does right by the individuals in our program and hopefully can bolster conservation prospects a little bit, but we find it very important to protect the current wild populations. Without them, yeah, there's very little hope for the future of orangutans and give a high quality of life to the orangutans we do have in our care. With these older individuals, you mentioned individual personality, being motivated to put in the work. And a lot of times we see in rehabilitation programs, you know, timing is really important. How young are they rescued from a human home? When are they ready to go back to the wild? You know, how much time they get to spend in forest school on islands. Would you say, do you think there's any link between the slow life history of orangutans and how long they spend with their mother versus what really is the ideal length of time for them to be in a rehabilitation program? Is there an ideal length of time? Are there ages we should be looking for if the circumstances allow, of course? When we rescue adults, we don't have that sort of luxury. But for the ones who are rescued early enough in life.
Well, this is where I think rehabilitation for orangutans is very difficult, maybe more so than other great apes, but it's also difficult for them as well, because it takes a long time, and that's a big investment. And I a little bit see in some rehabilitation programs, I think that this push to make them independent and this sort of tough love thing that's done very early, and I know it's done because they're trying to make them not become dependent, but I don't know if that's really the way orangutans work. And but I don't know how you make the next step, which is how to break that. But I really think that some of the very young orangutans really do need one-on-one contact with and if it's not an orangutan, it needs to be a person. But then you do run the risk of building that relationship that you're then going to try to break. But like Sheila so wonderfully said, that the mother does become less tolerant as the baby is older. So there is a process that the orangutan mother is following to break that dependency. But my heart breaks a little bit sometimes for the younger orangutans that I see that are by themselves that's not the way a wild orangutan ever is. It's being carried by its mother all the time. And so that's, but the investment of time is very expensive, and then I think, the same with many animals that have been in captivity a long time, they come in with very different experiences. Some are very coddled and others are really deprived and mentally unbalanced. So that's also really different. So you have to make an individual decision.
Yeah, it really depends. It really depends with the condition that the orangutans came into the rehabilitation. But if we talk about normal situation, let's say that the orangutans is healthy and then they get enough nutrition and then they come in a very young age. Like, let's say if they're like from the age 0 to 2, it's really common that they always being carried with the mother. So I think the intense contact with the surrogate mothers, it should be okay. But then we also need to understand that after a few years, like in the age of 3 and 4, and then like Felicity said, tough love. We need to be, we need to push them away a little bit. If they don't want to go away, we need to push them away a little bit. And then actually, as the orangutans grows up, they tend to move a little bit further from the mother. Like they can explore more and more as they grow older. So the mother and the infant have a really close bonding. Let's say we have a surrogate mother, the surrogate mother is going to have a really close bonding with the infant. But seeing how the orangutans works in the wild, they do get separated by they grow older from the mother. And then when the mother know it's time for the baby or the infant to be released, to be independent from the mother is going to push them away. So I think that's something you should you can apply it with the rehabilitated orangutans to, when we see how they are capable of the skill that they need to survive when they acquire that, then we need to do that tough love to push them away and then release them back in the wild. There's no certain ages because we don't know the capacity. We cannot really say what type, what the number, what ages we can release them. We really need specifically seeing the ability of each orangutans because it's going to be different.
So I'm gathering there's no one size fits all answer, but it's try to mimic the wild as much as the individual personality and skill set allows.
Yeah, and it's hard because you're dealing with a lot of numbers. So that's and it needs. It's really sad because it's an animal that grows up with a very individualized training, but yet you're dealing with lots of numbers.
Yeah.
So that's the real challenge.
Ms. Jones, on our side, we do try to. We don't think it's best to have one surrogate mother per orangutan. Either it's too much of a human orangutan bond, but these classes we do individually track each orangutan and their skill set and their personality to try to customize it as much as possible for the individuals. And they are, I would say, assessed on an individual basis, not graduated as a group. They're graduated when each one is ready. A couple at the same time, that's great. If it's just one, that's how it is. And yes.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just wanting to ask about that, because I know that in some other rehabilitation of great apes and also elephants, there's some programs where they very much put a one-on-one relationship in the very beginning. And so I wonder, is that just because of numbers? You would have to have 700 employees if you did very young animals on a one-on-one, or have you found that not to work? Why you don't have that model?
I will say when they're very young, so we call them our nursery students, when they're under 2 years old, it is certainly more intensive than our forest school students. So in the area, the surrogate mothers, they don't leave them at night. They sleep with them in the house. They're there all the time. And when they're not with a surrogate mother, there's always a surrogate mother around, but they're in contact with other individuals in their group. And that's something we really.
Oh, I see. So it's not just one-to-one. It's maybe one person to three animals in the nursery group.
Yeah. So there's there too. And if there happens to only be one orangutan, then there would be one surrogate mother for that orangutan. But there are smaller groups with, a larger surrogate mother presence. And as they get older, there's then less. And there's a stronger push for, even though it's not as natural, we hope for learning from conspecifics are older individuals who would, in a way, fill the role of an older sibling when specific forest school groups pass in the forest.
Yeah, one of the, if I may be so bold to say, I see a lot of bullying in rehabilitation centers in the older, which you don't see in the one, I mean, when but you don't see a lot of that playing. I mean, anytime a mother is near another mother, in my experience, and the babies will play. They just go and play. So they do play with other orangutans, but I don't. I mean, I've even seen a mother intervene when I think she thought the other one was being a bit rough on this other one. So, but in rehabilitation, I see a lot of bully behavior in these conspecific groups, which I think is nasty, and I don't know, and not what we see in the wild, which I wonder do you see that, or is it me? Maybe I'm not interpreting, but is that a problem for you? Or?
We do see it. No, it's definitely there. I wouldn't say it's a problem, and now everything I'm about to say is quite speculative. But if something was to be very extreme, our surrogate mothers would intervene as well. And we have some orangutans who, have a more dominant personality, especially when they get older, and they'd be seen more as that bully, right? Individual personalities. I would say, if I were to speculate, I think it's because we have even when orangutans pass in the wild, right? They're only, depending on the relationship of the mothers, maybe a couple hours or a couple of days.
Right. Yeah.
You're having so many individuals together all the time.
All the time. Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe if wild orangutans were together that much too, you'd see a little bit more, and with that range of ages. So we try to keep under check, and we do watch our social groups, especially. So once an orangutan's done with forest school, we want them to go to a pre-release island. If there's not space there right away, they go to what we call socialization cages, where they live in these large complexes with other individuals. And if there's certain individuals that just simply do not get along, we will move them. We don't want to just, subject one orangutan to being bullied by another orangutan. So that is watched and monitored. And I would speculate it's probably just due to the frequency of social interactions.
Yeah, you're probably right. I didn't think about that. It's not the sort of 24/7 with another. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have siblings, but I know when I visiting my sister, if we're together too much, we start fighting too.
Well, that's always what you have in a wild situation. Even as Sheila was saying, when the older sibling comes by, when they've had enough, they leave. So I take your point.
are great discussions to have, and this is how we continue to develop our knowledge. Because that's one thing I've noticed during this talk, which is fine, is there's been a couple of maybe this, but I don't know. And I think I don't know is such an important phrase, right? Saying I don't know. If you know what you don't know, you can try to learn what it is and work together to find a solution. Which, speaking of working together, I have so many more questions I want to ask you guys, and I'm sure there's lots of comments and questions, but I do know we're running out of time, and we do have to start to wrap up soon. So before we go, I want to ask you both one last question. We all have the privilege to work in the field in Indonesia and Malaysia, but most people tuning in today are not in these countries. They might be living in a big city. So do you have any advice for people who live in cities or elsewhere who want to support orangutans and their conservation and what they can do in their daily lives to help these amazing animals that we all love so much?
Well, for me, there are several things that, let's say, young people, like students or people living in the city, there's several things that they can do. For me, like, they can be a smart consumer, because we know the biggest threat that we face with orangutans conservation is the destruction of their habitats. And mostly the destruction of their habitats is like deforestation and then plantation and stuff. And yeah, like palm olive and stuff. And then if we can be a smart consumer and then start choosing products that is more environmental friendly, that probably could help, because it's a supply and demand. Where there is a demand, there's going to be supplies. And yeah, there's much thing also we can do. We can raising awareness, starting campaign with our own social media maybe, or you could volunteer if you have time.
That's a great one. I completely agree. Felicity?
I completely agree with what Sheila says, and you know, looking after your own environment, because we're all connected. I just had a video that was given to me by one of my collaborators, and he's a sustainability officer in an oil palm company, and his 12-year-old daughter had a speaking contest, and she said, "We're all on one Earth. Mars, forget about it." And I loved it, because she said, we need to keep our Earth, you know, don't litter, don't pollute, all of these things that are because even if you live in a city, you're still part of the same place. We may be working in different places, and there's pluses and minuses. You know, you look from what somebody else is doing, you go, oh, I wish I was doing that, or so we're so looking after your Earth. And I think remembering for people who are very compelled when they see a picture of an orangutan, that the best orangutan that we're all working for is a wild orangutan living independent life, and that we need to learn to love them at a distance, which is when you are a field researcher, you never interact with your study subject, you are observing. So the things that Sheila said, what we were observing and I've observed, we don't have a interactive relationship with that animal that we're observing. We're watching and loving it from a very far distance, and we're not interacting. That's really different than what you have in a rehab situation, but so that type of loving a wild animal for being a wild animal, and separating in your mind what a pet animal is. Love your pets, love dogs and cats. They're great at that, but an orangutan doesn't belong as a pet, and that's an important thing to remember, that what type of love, you know, we have capacity for a lot of type of love, and we need to love them in their home as the amazing animals that they are. And they're even more amazing when you have the privilege that Sheila and I have to see wild animals. And even if you never get to see a wild animal, that knowing it's out there is what we all want. And so.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I've once heard the less interaction with the wildlife is the more successful the conservation is.
Yes. If you want to coexist with wildlife, which is what I do a lot now in trying to make in more and more peopled, mixed, oil palm villages, fragmented forest landscapes, coexistence means keeping a healthy distance from each other. This is my area, this is your area, and not actually doing things that encourage closer contact, because like feeding, especially feeding primates, there's nothing ever good that ever comes from that for the primate. So that, again, that's exactly what Sheila said. It's about maintaining that sort of distance if you want to coexist, actually.
Well, thank you both for your time today. All this amazing information today, just ending on some really powerful messages there from both of you. So thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Felicity. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you both.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much. I mean, usually these guys, you think, am I going to enjoy myself? But it's been so wonderful to chat with you. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I look forward to hearing more from both of you in the future.
We'll
it's really a pleasure for me too. It's really nice having a chat with you guys. I learned so much from both of you. I'm really grateful to be invited in this event.
Thank you both, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in for this session. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as the three of us have. I'm going to pass you back to our moderators of the entire event, and happy Orangutan Day, everyone.
Yes!
Yay! Happy Orangutan Day!
All right, well, that was another great discussion. And of course, we always want to see orangutans behaving naturally as they would when they are free in the forest. And that's the goal, right? To teach them those natural behaviors and skills so they can survive. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes we see orangutans in different situations in which they are behaving very unnaturally. And one of the ways that happens is when orangutans are taken from the forest, often as babies, their mothers are killed, the babies are taken, and those orangutans end up at tourist destinations around the world. And they're put in very unnatural conditions and display very unnatural behaviors, all for the entertainment and amusement of people who oftentimes don't even realize how unnatural this is, and that they're actually watching an orangutan be exploited right in front of them. And so to bring this situation to light, a wonderful documentary was created, and it's called Eyes of the Orangutan. And it really is a hard-hitting look at the wildlife tourism industry and what that means for various animals, particularly the orangutan. So Ben, can you tell us a little bit more about Eyes of the Orangutan and how people can watch it?
Yes, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, orangutans are facing so many threats. This isn't just a single threat that we're losing the rainforest. They are facing so many, and that's why we're seeing the dwindling numbers. And one of these threats being the wildlife trafficking of these animals, these babies, away from their mothers, who are generally lost, killed, and then the baby is being sent over to these horrible facilities to live a life in entertainment. It's horrible. So we were very proud. The BOS organization, specifically BOS Switzerland, were very proud to partner with Aaron Gakowski, the award-winning documentary filmmaker, who has put his lens to so many animal issues, and very proud that he was interested and willing to put so much time and effort to put his lens towards this specific issue and seeing these orangutans being trafficked and taken to these facilities for entertainment, for boxing, to be dressed up. So because we need to expose it, we need to bring the awareness, the education to this issue to stop that. So they asked for everyone here is that please never support any kind of an entertainment facility which animals are being exploited for entertainment. That just, unfortunately, even though some people may think they look like they're happy, they're not. They're living a life in captivity, in most times solitude, and being forced to perform. So that's the ask. And then the second ask is that we hope that we would love for you all to join us this Sunday on August 22nd. And for the US, that will be at either 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern to watch the global screening of this documentary, the first time that we're going to be doing a global screening of this. So you'll be able to actually watch this documentary, and we hope to get it into the US here soon. But right now, this is the only opportunity you have to see this documentary. So you do not want to miss this. So again, the times are 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And if you go to the website eyesoftheorangutan.com, you can learn more about this. You can rewatch the trailer and you can register for the event. So with that, I'm going to turn you over. We're going to actually watch the trailer right now so you can get a sense for what this documentary is all about. So enjoy.
As photographers, we all have an opportunity to document and then to broadcast the truth. What we see and what we record can help change the world.
My name is Aaron Jakoski. I'm an environmental photojournalist. I've spent the past decade covering human-animal conflict around the world. But now I'm deep into the most important project I'll ever work on.
There's beatings and cruelty beyond belief and abuse that goes on behind the scenes that the tourists don't know about.
This is a wildlife house of horrors.
Everybody buying a ticket is responsible.
Traveling the world to enter the dark heart of the orangutan tourism industry.
He has an international network. Even some officials have been arrested within this case.
I had no idea where this would lead me and how big it would become.
The eyes of orangutan is coming before I go to bed, and it still remind me that I have to work harder and harder to let them out from the cages.
It's great to see that there actually is hope here.
This is the story of the wildlife tourism industry and its impact on one of our closest living relatives.
That trailer gives me chills every time I see it. And I can tell you, I've seen the full documentary and it's a must watch. I hope everyone joins us Sunday. And again, the website eyesoftheorangutan.com, and it will be at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time this Sunday, August 22nd. And after that very challenging topic, we want to kind of lighten the mood. So for the HUTAN match, I can turn you over to Debbie to introduce our next video.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. That is, it's hard to watch, definitely, but important. Something that we know you love to watch, though, is orangutans having fun. And one of your favorite orangutans is Benny. And so at Orangutan Outreach, we get Benny questions all the time. How is Benny? What is Benny doing now? Where is Benny? When is Benny going to be released? And for those of you who don't know Benny, you got a little peek at him a little bit earlier in our broadcast. He's a real character. And so he's highlighted on Orangutan Jungle School, the series, and he just immediately became a fan favorite. So we wanted to answer some of those Benny questions for you and let you know that, yes, Benny has completed forest school. He's graduated. Some of us weren't quite sure he was going to make it through because he's such a class clown, but he buckled down and he learned his lessons and he has completed the process. So now Benny is waiting for his turn on a pre-release island. And as we talked about at the very beginning of our event tonight, there are a lot of obstacles that prevent that from happening as quickly as we would like it to. So yes, we all cannot wait for Benny to get to that pre-release island. And as soon as we have everything in place and those obstacles out of the way, Benny can get his chance on the pre-release island to really prove himself once and for all before he's released, hopefully, into the forest to live completely on his own. So we wanted to give you a little recap of Benny's story. Some of you may have seen this video, maybe brand new to others of you. So enjoy this look back at all things Benny. Everybody loves Benny. And as we said, we're doing everything we can to get Benny to his pre-release island and eventually to full freedom into the rainforest. And that, of course, is the ultimate goal for all the orangutans that come into the rehab center. It can't happen for all of them, for every orangutan that it's possible. We want to get them through the rehabilitation process and back to living in the rainforest where they belong. And again, we've been talking all night about some of those obstacles. And of course, the pandemic has been a huge obstacle. And so for a very long time, the releases had to temporarily be suspended. And the BOS Foundation was not able to release any orangutans into the forest. There were plenty who were ready. It just wasn't the right time to do it. But thankfully, at the beginning of 2021, the releases were able to happen once again. So we have a video that we want to show you about how that was done. Ben, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about all the procedures that went into this particular release and tell us about the video we're about to see.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Yeah, as Debbie mentioned, we had to pause releases for quite some time, and it was very difficult. But first and foremost, the orangutan safety and the safety of our staff has to come first. So as difficult as it was to kind of have this backlog of orangutans waiting to get back to the wild, it was the right decision. It was only when we finally had the protocols in place and we could go through every step to ensure that we were not introducing this horrible pandemic into a wild population that we felt comfortable to start releasing them. And that took all the way until February of this year. So basically a year after the pandemic first broke in Indonesia, for us to be able to feel comfortable to do so. And we did so in a big fashion, actually. We have quite a few that are still waiting to get back to the wild. This first release was for 10 orangutans in total. And to get them deep into the rainforest is a very, very complex process. And the best way, the fastest way, most efficient way, and the best way for them to be protected was to airlift them. So we hired a helicopter team, a professional helicopter team that we worked with before to airlift these orangutans back. And so this time, because we knew this would be an exciting moment, we actually wired up the cages, the transport cages with cameras, so you could actually see them on their way back and you can follow them on that journey. So we have this incredible video from our release this February of 10 orangutans, and we're going to show you that to you now.
I love that helicopter video. I love seeing the GoPro right there next to the orangutans as they fly off to freedom. That's fantastic. And I hope that that video gives you a sense of the fact that we are going to do whatever it takes to get orangutans back to the forest where they belong. We will find a way, make a way, and we truly, truly appreciate your support in helping that to happen. Because when we need to use helicopters, it obviously costs a lot more money than when we do those releases by road and by river. So thank you for continuing to support. Thank you for continuing to donate so we can get more and more orangutans back to the forest where they belong. So, and I also just want to say a big thank you to everyone for sticking with us for the last 3 hours. Hope that you really learned a lot. It has been my absolute pleasure to be here with Ben and co-host this great Orangutan Day event. So I hope you got a little bit of insight into what it really takes to get orangutans back to the forest, those obstacles that the orangutans face and that we face, and particularly the pandemic being the biggest obstacle right now. And then also I hope you got a little insight into orangutan behavior and that fun behavior that we always want to see, that natural behavior, and that you really got a sense of what it means to have unnatural behavior and what we don't want to see from orangutans. So we know we threw a lot at you, but it's because you asked for it. And we really wanted to address all those questions that we get all the time about orangutans. And so this event was really to give back to you our way of saying thank you for your support through the years. Particularly, I want to thank you again on behalf of myself and Richard Zimmerman, the Executive Director of Orangutan Outreach, for your years and years of support of our organization. And we know that particularly in the US, there's going to be even more people now on board with the addition of the BOS US office. We're going to be able to do so much more for the orangutan. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ben, for co-hosting with me tonight. This was a lot of fun. And I'm sure you have a few things you'd like to say as we close out our evening.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, it was, believe it or not, I mean, I thank you for spending the last few hours with us. And it was difficult to actually pare it down to 3 hours. We can talk about orangutans for 24/7, and there's enough content, enough video to do so. So it's been a long event, but like I said, it could have been much longer. So, but if you want more orangutans, because everyone always wants more orangutan information, there's many ways in which you can do that. As we mentioned, we have our award-winning award-winning series, Orangutan Jungle School, that airs in the US on the Smithsonian Channel, if you have access to that. And if you're around the world, you can go to orangutanjungleschool.com to see if it's airing in your country. And we get asked a lot about whether or not there'll be a third season, because if you go, you can actually catch up for the last 2 seasons if you haven't seen it. And fingers crossed, we're going to have a third season. But we don't have information on that just yet. So after this, the other thing you need to do is sign up to our email lists, because that will be the first place that you'll be able to hear it, is if you get to our social channels and our email lists to make sure that. So sign up for one, both, or actually preferably both. And that way you can make sure you don't miss anything coming from either of our organizations. So that's one thing you can do. And then of course, as we mentioned, this Sunday, we have the documentary Eyes of the Orangutan, which is that hard-hitting, powerful view into this horrible wildlife trafficking of orangutans and what's happening, what the issue is, and what's being done, and hopefully educate you so we can continue to move this issue forward to stop these orangutans being taken from their mothers and being sent over to these entertainment facilities. So please don't miss that, eyesoftheorangutan.com. Airing this Sunday, August 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Or if you are connecting globally, we have 2 screenings of it. So if you go to that website, you can see both screenings that might fit better into your time zone. And with that, we're going to let you back to your Thursday evening. Thank you for spending it with us. We were really proud that you spent it with us. It means a lot to both BOS USA and I know to Orangutan Outreach and the BOS Foundation for you to be with us this evening to enjoy and learn and educate and laugh and sometimes even want to cry. And that's the challenge that we face with orangutans, but we will not stop until they are saved. So with that, we're going to go ahead and say goodnight. Yep. And thank you all, and join our next event. All right.
Yep. Thanks. Good night,
Bye,
everyone.